Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfalas with the economic news of the day. Today's show, African migrants enter Europe in growing numbers, and more Qatari women enter the workforce. First, the headlines. European finance ministers on Tuesday granted France 2 more years to bring its deficit below 3% of its GDP. The move, which was widely expected, is the third extension France has been granted since 2009. France's budget deficit is expected to be 4.1% of GDP this year as it struggles with high unemployment. But critics warn that the extensions undermine the EU's market credibility, and Ireland demanded more leeway for its budget spending next year as well.
The country now has to follow up on the recommendation with structural adjustment of 0.5% of GDP this year, 0.8% of GDP in 2016, and 0.9% of GDP in 2017.
We stay in the EU as finance ministers approved the key components of JeanClaude Juncker's flagship investment plan. The EU's effort to jumpstart the continent's flagging economy was immediately met with pledges of support, though none directly to the fund. The financial contributions instead will only be made through national investment banks, guaranteeing the funds will go towards domestic projects. Despite the blow to the Juncker plan's EU-wide spirit, European Commission Vice President Jyrki Katainen said it made no difference to the overall success of the plan.
Italy is the fourth country doing so. Germany has announced 8 billion. France, just a couple of days ago, announced, the Prime Minister was just announced 8 billion. And Prime Minister Renzi today, just half an hour ago, announced that Italy is willing to join to this group. And Spain last week announced that they are willing to participate to the plan by offering 1.5 billion euros.
Despite monetary easing policies, the Chinese economy is off to a sluggish start in 2015. Industrial output rose a less than anticipated 6.8% in January and February from a year earlier, the National Bureau of Statistics said on Wednesday. The 2-month reading shows the slowest start to a year since 2009. The Bank of China has sought to cushion the slowdown with 2 interest rate cuts and 1 reduction to banks' reserve requirements in the past 4 months. But analysts widely expect the People's Bank of China will cut benchmark deposit and lending rates again next quarter as the economy slows. And while the economy lags, the number of Chinese outbound tourists continues to boom. According to a new analysis by Bank of America Merrill Lynch, the number of Chinese tourists will grow to 174 million by 2019 from 109 million in 2014. Those tourists will spend $264 billion in 2019, $100 billion more than last year. Millennials, or 25 to 34-year-olds, are expected to make up the bulk of Chinese tourists at 35% of the total, followed by 15 to 24-year-olds accounting for around 27%. But as only about 5% of China's 1.3 billion population hold passports, the potential for outbound tourism is vast and far larger than when Japanese tourists initially started traveling about 30 years ago. As African migrants continue to cross into Europe, Italy called for a system of migrant reception centers in North Africa to intercept asylum seekers. Those judged to be legitimately fleeing wars would be allowed to initiate the asylum process, but those deemed to be economic migrants would be sent back to their home countries.
Foreign ministers representing a number of member states of the European Union met last weekend in Latvia to talk security and migration, in particular from North Africa to Italy and France. 7,900 migrants arrived in Italy, mostly from North Africa, over the first 2 months of the year, a 43% increase from the year before, according to the Italian Foreign Ministry. Violence in Libya and other close-by regions is seen as the root cause of the movement north.
Migrations require a joint effort, including a naval effort of all European countries. The Italian government is working on this, and I believe they are having an encouraging response.
The journey is perilous, and the EU's border control agency, Frontex, manages the Triton naval operation to help Italy handle the flow of migrants from North Africa. However, the Triton cost, which runs at between 1.5 and 2.9 million euro per month according to Amnesty International, is significantly smaller than the Mare Nostrum operation that Italy had to close despite saving thousands of lives, which cost 9.5 million euro per month. Meanwhile, at a displaced person center in Libya, hundreds wait without healthcare or aid, vowing to reach Europe.
I do not wish to return to my native country. We have no country. Our homeland is starvation and death and killing. If you send us back, they will send us to jails, and then they will send us to fight in the wars. I do not want to go back to my country. I want to go to Europe. All of us here want to.
UNHCR says 3,500 of 218,000 who have crossed in recent years have been killed. Some migrants report paying between $500 and $1,000 to cross in rubber dinghies, and boats often carrying 100 or more passengers. This makes this dangerous journey incredibly lucrative for traffickers.
And we're joined now by ITV News editor Ruth Sinai for more on the immigration question. Ms. Sinai, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Now, this is obviously a situation we've been looking at for many years now, but it seems to be getting worse. One of the reasons perhaps being in the wake of Arab Spring, Boko Haram, whatever it may be, there's more and more migrants going over the Mediterranean and dying in the Mediterranean, trying to get into Europe. What should Europe do?
Look, there's about something like 2 million migrants, asylum seekers, job seekers, you can call them whatever you want, coming into Europe every year now.
Right.
The Libyan civil war now is, augmenting these figures. Something like 500,000 Libyans who are waiting on the shores to hitch some sort of ride to Europe. The Syrian situation, the civil war, I mean, they're coming from all over. And Europe is inundated. Now, really, the question is, what do you do, as you asked? So there's one sure thing is it's not going away, and the efforts that have been tried until now, which is to turn away these people and incarcerate them, haven't really been working. So what does one do? There is JeanClaude Juncker, who is the European Commission president. He's like the Obama of Europe. He wants to launch an ambitious plan to kickstart the European economy. He wants to build railroads and roads and sort of do away with the scare of deflation. There's a think tank that suggested an idea. Instead of building roads and bypasses and so on, why don't you start revamping the huge slums in the European cities, where a lot of these migrants, first generation, second generation, third generation, where they live.
Which is still infrastructural investment, which obviously still goes in the covers of the bank and such.
Exactly, and it would address the problem that has been, that has emerged lately, which is of this terrorism and IS recruitment and so on, which, stems from a lot of these, slum neighborhoods, these underinvested, undereducated population centers. So that's one thing that perhaps one can think of. Now, there's a huge humanitarian crisis. A lot of these people cannot join the job market, cannot go and build infrastructure. What do you do with them? I don't know that anybody has a solution, but obviously they need to think of one. Now, the third aspect of this is that there is no doubt, and we've spoken about this before, that immigrants basically generate what's the word I'm looking for?
They generate jobs. They generate growth.
They generate growth. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. They generate growth. There are numerous figures to back that idea. Hundreds of thousands of non-Europeans have opened small businesses and have really become the backbone of the economies of Western Europe. And the last point that we should think about is the fact that an aging population in Europe really needs these immigrants. So obviously these horrible pictures of the boat people and people knocking on the doors and some of them sick and uneducated is frightening. It's sort of an invasion.
Right. I mean, you have the situation of the uneducated, so to speak. I mean, a lot of people who would critique and say, well, you have these uneducated people coming in and taking the jobs of our lower classes, so to speak, and see it as a threat. Is that a fair threat?
It is a threat. You know, there probably are not enough jobs for everybody if it's at a rate of 2 million a year coming in from the outside, in addition to the East Europeans who are flocking to the West looking for jobs. But on the other hand, what are you going to do? You're not going to drown them. You're not going to kill them. You have to find a solution.
Right.
And if not for them, then for their children.
Situation, so to speak. Well, Ritzi Nai, ITV News editor, thanks for joining us on the show. Thank you. Qatari women increasingly defy social constraints, following a new initiative that offers support for new enterprises and aims to increase the number of working nationals. More women now also join the workforce.
At only 28 years old, Mariam El Soubaye runs her own company, selling objects made in Qatar. All Qataris, both men and women, are guaranteed a job, higher wages, and simplified procedures should they ever decide to start a business, all thanks to a nationalization program called Qatarization.
I was the director of programs and creation in Qatar television, and before that I worked in marketing and at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I started several youth initiatives, and so I just reached a point in my life where I wanted to create something that's my own.
The emancipation of women in Qatar reached its peak in 1999, when women gained the right to vote and run for public office, an initiative that came from the top at the request of Sheikha Moza, wife to Qatar's former emir. At the Carnegie Mellon University in Doha, there are now 4 times more women registered in the business program than men.
We have women in IT, we have women in the banking sector, they work in hospitals, they work in any sector you can imagine.
Qatar is one of the wealthiest per capita nations in the world. In this favorable economic context, young Qataris are encouraged to contribute to the country's development.
It's easy to create your own company, so young people take advantage of that. They're well equipped for it and they're encouraged to do it. There are many business centers here, like the Business Incubation Center of Qatar, which was recently created. There are plenty of banks who create prizes for young entrepreneurs. It's a priority.
And at this forum for startup creators, most of the featured companies are run by women. Qatar is paving the way in terms of women's rights, but there is still some resistance.
It's difficult, I think, for people to accept that the culture is still conservative in a way, that they do think that women can do something, or they're less in a way than the guys. I'm not sure why, but this generation is actually approving the opposite by having more ladies leading things and being in a top positions.
Despite its progress, Qatar remains a patriarchal society, and women there face different forms of discrimination. Men and women are entitled to equal salaries, but some sectors like agriculture or fishing are still exclusively reserved to men. In 2012, only 35% of Qatari women old enough to work held a job, a percentage that seems to have come to a standstill.
And from Qatar to social justice and IT tycoons in Media Watch with Daniel Roth. Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so social justice.
Yes, Jeffrey Sachs, economist, writing in The Guardian, big, important piece, talking about new horizons in economics.
New horizons, do explain.
Yes, essentially we're facing irreversible climate change.
Yeah.
This is something that we're facing as a globe. And as a globe, Jeffrey Sachs is arguing our global system of economics does not recognize the environmental costs of the economics we run.
Yeah.
So our systems are based on infinite growth. The idea, the competition, so to speak, is every year you should have your economy should be growing.
Right.
What the environment tells us, what nature tells us, is that that's literally impossible.
Sure.
Not only is there a cost, there is a cost, and it's a cost that we're feeling in our health and in the world around us.
Yeah.
But it's literally actually impossible, and there will come a point where unless we put the environment and economics in sync, we'll find that the environment and economics will be on two opposing sides of a battle.
Right.
And
it's no longer just a situation of like, this is the kind of world I want to live in. I want to see pretty trees. It's a situation of, well, you know, the environment is going to, so to speak, take back, you know, come in and make it impossible for us to actually continue growing.
Right. You know, one of the things people tend to say is we're killing the environment. Well, the truth is that the environment will take us over in the end.
We're part of the environment. We're going to be killed.
Right. And so Jeffrey Sachs is saying essentially we need a new recipe. We need a recipe that does take into account prosperity, growth, people doing new things and believing in new ideas. And he says the second thing, though, is, of course, environmental justice. That means taking into account the limits of nature, the limits of the world around you. And thirdly is social justice, which is taking into account the human cost, the human factor, paying people fairly, ensuring people have good working conditions. So the new economy that Sachs is proposing is one that takes into account the real-life borders around us.
Okay, well, Daniel Roth, on that note of live borders, we're going to have to end here. Thank you very much. That is the end of The Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong-Alfares. Thanks for joining us, and do join us again tomorrow for more on the economy.